Maxima Kahn lives in the Sierra Nevada in California. Her debut full-length collection of poems entitled Fierce Aria was released by Finishing Line Press in 2020. Her poetry and essays have appeared in Louisville Review, the Los Angeles Review, Wisconsin Review, and Sweet, among many others. Maxima has received fellowships and scholarships to the Vermont Studio Center and the Community of Writers. Having taught at the University of California, Davis Extension, she now teaches at brilliantplayground.com. You can get insider access to her creative process and new works at patreon.com/Maxima Kahn. Please welcome Maxima Kahn.
Thank you. So yeah, so nice to be here with you all. Thank you, Sandy, for keeping this amazing thing going on Zoom and making this space for poets and poetry lovers to gather together. And I'm looking forward to hearing your poems, Joe, and all of the open mic readers as well. So yeah, I'm going to read mostly from my new book, Fierce Aria. It came out in 2020 from Finishing Line Press, and maybe do one or two newer things after that. We'll see how the time goes. So I'm going to start by reading the poem that gave birth to the title of the book. It's called Harbor Song. Listen, I have to trust the wind that blows through me, nearly blows me out. The body's ballad full of suppressed anger and shimmer, constant song out over the harbor like the bell of a lighthouse, off again, on again, like the light cutting fog. Listen. The music glides unriveted to any solid thing, pours down from some heaven or haven, all agate and azure and mist we can't catch. The oceans drenched him, swallowing whatever identities I once clutched, riven now, tide taking the no longer beautiful, turning it to sand or brushed bottle glass color of bruise. Strange ghost, it transforms as it makes its transit. I'm afraid of its sway and tidal power, its unhinged and unhinging movement. I'm afraid of the melody, moving like dark water through my bones, annihilating while restoring me whole. Yet I am washed or I am nothing. Life is furious song or it is emptiness. This wrenching grace, fierce aria, is all. Thanks. I'm going to read a poem I wrote a long time ago, actually. In 2001, I spent a month as a visiting writer at the Vermont Studio Center, which is an amazing artist colony in way northern Vermont. 50 artists are there for a month at a time, mostly visual artists. 8 of us were writers. And it was just this incredibly stimulating and wonderful experience in the dead of winter. And browsing around in the library there, I found this dictionary of clouds with the most amazing photographs of clouds and the most beautiful and wondrous language to describe clouds. And that gave birth to this poem, The Language of Clouds, which is really about one of my obsessive topics that I write about a lot, which is how does language limit us, define us, the language that we use? How does it shape us? What can we say? What can't we say? The Language of Clouds. Sky writes large with a brilliant hand, wave and anvil, impending horizon. Clouds stack up like plates, white china waiting to fall. The gods' pellucid writing in the advancing squall. while down on earth we stumble in the fog, our gestures hardly able to articulate such light. Wan palettes thinning over grayed canvas, threadbare desire, tired old wants, our words a muttered air trailing off before the ends, mute icons towards something we don't understand. Captured ice hangs in the atmosphere, striking us dumb. Cirrus streaks across the sky, nimbus laden with rain, cumulus paving clouds, streets. How to compare these dialects of illumination? Black waves swallow mountains whole, rewrite the known in vast billows on which runs. If I could appropriate the language of clouds, tune its cold mastery to my mouth, draw my images in inverted air with noctilucent lines, spread myself across the sky in manic hues, peach blossom, gunmetal, mauve, and turquoise, and always be erasing, like the Tibetan sand masters, building grain by grain elaborate mandalas to be emptied in the river's flow. If I could speak in stacked plumes, mock suns, and errant holes in the sky, if these distortions were my speech, the scud and pileus, who would I be? How does my language write me? And I'm gonna read this poem Reading Right again. I wrote it for Charles Wright, the poet Charles Wright, whose work I absolutely love. But I chose to read it tonight because I know most of you are poets and writers, and it's really speaking to us. So it's really for all of us. Listen to the still thought in the dull pencil lying on the desk, how it harbors secret ambitions, envying the fountain pen that luxuriates in a velvet box, or the humbleness of the four-square notepad wanting to be used up. I know what you are thinking, rhyming in your tongue, huddled in your solitudes, observant of the weather. I know about fortitude and failure, how we are blessed with ordinary thought, supermarkets, junk mail, and lousy weather wavering between sleet and snow. These missives like bottles thrown out over an open sea. Line and curve and ink blot make a conjuring you and I understand, linger in some page of book and musty library to well up in other mouths, budding like new fruit. But then the punctuation trips us up. It's hard hand, cruel-edged rules, so unforgiving, like a bad parent, foolish and small. It wants to steady itself with obstructions, and we allow it because we need those confines to rein our vagrant imaginations in. And we see a reflection of ourselves in those sad gestures reappearing in every sentence. Also different from the rock and branch, different from the snow, those lives nothing like our own, those dreams not even what we know as dreams. Just look at the drops of water in a shining row on this branch of blossoming dogwood. So my book Fierce Aria is divided in three sections that I think of as musical movements, and they have musical indications for the movements. I am a musician also. So this next poem's from the second section, which is, the section's called Adagio Mesto, which means slow and sad. I think of it as the slow, sad movement, like in a classical piece. This poem's called Valley. I have learned to walk in the valley of my fears and losses, my thin griefs drawn tight like shrouds. I have learned to keep moving, to keep my tongue light and the roads of my want stretched before me like ice you might break through. We get no guarantees. That is what shatters us. I would trade this longing for that one, my homebound homelessness for a wanderer's heart, my dream of heaven for another night with you. But God isn't taking any bargains this sun-struck afternoon. I listen to the river of wind, hold up my chapped hands, spilling over with green light of a new spring, still answerless in the hollows of my heart. So I'll just do a couple more from Fierce Aria, and then maybe I'll have time for one or more of the newer ones. This one's called The More You Break It. It starts with a quote from the poet Mark Doty, who I also love. His quote is, "The more you break it, the nearer it comes to whole." And I was very struck by that. The more you break it, the nearer it comes to whole. So this is my poem, The More You Break It. Is it true? What shatters us day after vanishing day is how we are being annealed into the fullness that we are. Our salt tears, like pieces of glass meant to catch the light, capture it, reflect some truth hidden in us we were blind to in our happiness. When the light was not fractured, when we didn't know we needed the very force, destroyer, ruthless, how it goes in a circle. And we can only approach when every fragment is fragmented, hammered, splintered, strewn, spent. When it lies glittering, white sand on a beach, not to make a prayer of suffering, but to find solace in the knowing that this destruction, these shards of the mirror, we can only come nearer when we come through the fire, burnished, reflective, so that we see ourselves as we are in this broken mirror, whole. It does seem to work that way, doesn't it? In a strange kind of way. Our griefs and losses and challenges are what make us whole. Okay, so this is the last one from Fierce Aria, and then we'll see if we have time for one of the newer ones. This is called Wild Earth. I wrote this poem after I had a really striking experience on my land, hearing the stones and the trees kind of calling out to me. And I had lived there for years before having this experience. And I actually felt ashamed that I hadn't paid better attention sooner. Wild Earth. Wild earth, wild sky, how many times have the stars sung my name and I failed to listen? How many years have the trees been longing for my embrace while I stood apart? How long has the earth risen to meet me and all things conspired to bring forth my true unfolding while I stumbled into walls muttering, alone, alone, alone. Worn thin, guarding against the worst, all the while the earth calling for my touch. Since the day of my birth, the river has been flowing, ready to carry me, while I paddled furiously, mustering my will. Now my heart breaks open, hearing the singing, leaning my face against the cool of a rock that reaches for me. The structures that held my life, the false edifices of fear, obligation, guilt give way. And I stand in wonder, humbled, not knowing who I am. Thanks for listening. So yeah, I'll
There's time for a few more, actually. You're only at about 13 minutes, so feel free to read 2 or 3 more.
Do a couple more? Okay, I'll do 2 more.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we'll move on, because I know there's lots of you with wonderful poems to share too. Okay, so yeah, these are a couple of newer ones. Fierce Aria took me 10 years to put together and relentlessly revise. So by the time it came out in the world, there are a lot of poems that are more recent than that book. So here's a couple. This one's called And Birds, and I also chose it for you all because you're writers. So many of you are writers. And Birds. It's not that hard to write a poem. What's hard is to write a really good poem. You have to translate the undulates, to render, glean, to peck at them, to fail. The only way is to care enough, open wide enough, begin again. The shadows in the foreground now, the basking day, the terrors clustered in the undergrowth, to reach a hand in there, utter task, gnawing at the bone, to rearrange and be disordered, limbs askew now, askance, asking for stance, closer to meaning without making too plain, as nature does in shadows, dealing her hand. To imitate her coy artlessness, to falter, what nature does in seasons to do on the page, continual dressing and redressing, putting on the shadows now, the garments of the day, flowers flutter, what nature riddles between leaves, lavish, how the sky presents a blank face, then glowers, hunches over with clouds, and birds, what they do. And I'll close with this for Valentine's Day. In honor of Valentine's Day, I'm going to read a poem called Married Love. But I do feel that Valentine's Day really should be a celebration of all forms of love and not just romantic love. I really miss the days when I got to go to elementary school with 30 little Valentines to give out to all my friends. That's what I wish we would do on Valentine's Day. So this is Married Love. The heart of the poem is this mystery called sorrow, this confounding called human relations. But it takes flight among the small finches busy about the bird feeder retreating to the limbs of oak. This mystery of connection, need, and longing, and then the daily dodging of who will change the cat box. The heart of the poem rests on a cotton mattress curled around the naked body of the beloved in a peace so deep it's a wonder it comes daily. This ineffable bounty, so lavish, it's like pouring coffers of gold onto the floor in great heaps, morning after morning. The heart of the poem is the heart of our lives. We give it form by enumerating the 4 diminutive eggs cracked into the frying pan, all the possibility in an egg and the undoing of that in the cracking of them. The shared breakfast on woven turquoise placemats, rustling of newspaper, affections strong enough to be burrowed in and just slightly taken for granted, though we know better at our ages, having weathered harder love, than to ever take this sweet, deepening peace for granted. Each kiss could be the last. Life dwindles the way the water in the bird bath dries up each day or is splashed out by robins who bathe wastefully, scaring the smaller birds. There is no I, no you, no him, nor her. And yet there is sweet paradox that allows us to press our bodies together in the kitchen, his scruff tickling her upper lip, her belly conforming around his, and take a deep breath of the scent of the other. We wouldn't have this pleasure without bodies, without sorrow and death. the bird bath water all splashed out on the paving stones below. Thanks so much for having me here and for listening.